Hello and welcome to episode 4 of Silph Thyme, our Pokemon Go PvP podcast. I'm Zacharias and I'm here as always with Thidricker, our host.
Goes and Diane Herslinger. Hope everyone's having a wonderful day. What are we talking about today, Zacharias?
We've got a few things on the chopping block for today. So we're going to start out with a discussion of cores in Pokemon Go PvP. So if you're not familiar, that's the concept of having 2 or 3 Pokemon as a core to build a team around. So the 2 to 3 Pokemon being the cornerstone, the core, and then you have whatever spice or filler that you want around it. So that would be especially relevant in the 6s that we'd play in Silph, but also in the 3s for Go Battle League, you'd say a core of 2 specific Pokemon to build around. And you'd see those pop up very frequently in your typical Go Battle League metas. And we're going to go through some other stuff about cores and Go Battle League, and then we'll have our usual Who's Line discussion. And
Got some
then we'll
spicy
finish
teams
up
to
with
build today.
Yeah, and we'll finish up with some chats about Nemesis Cup, the ongoing Silph April meta.
All right, perfect. Well, then let's dive into cores. So you just gave us a brief summary. When we talk about a core, we'll keep it general for Go Battle League. What are we looking for in a core?
Usually you're looking, I don't want to say the, peak meta, but it ends up being that way because you're looking for strong Pokemon to build around. So you're looking for usually 2 Pokemon that sit well, cover each other's weaknesses, and have a good synergy together. That would usually be the way I feel about it. So, if you had a specific setup you wanted to run, I don't know, Galarian Stunfisk, you'd want to pair that with something that covered its weaknesses. It doesn't want to come up against a Metacham, so you want maybe a flyer to cover. So a core would be something like that, at least in my mind. What do you reckon?
Yeah, it needs to be able to handle the majority of the meta well. There are probably a few weaknesses here or there, which is why on a duo core, you want something to either pivot, meaning get your weak spot out and allow you to realign properly, or something that will cover what you're expecting them to bring as a core breaker, something specifically designed to beat both of them. So we had a little bit of a chat about this in episode 3 when we were having our interview with Lurgan Rocket, the first Liverpool champion. If you haven't listened to that, make sure you go back and give it a listen. He has some great thoughts on that. But yeah, so a core is really what we're looking for to cover the majority of weaknesses and work well in most situations where we can change out one piece in a duo core, or where we kind of have to retool the whole thing if we're looking at a nice trio core. Based on how the meta, when we say meta, I guess this is a term that not everyone is familiar with. The meta is not what's the strongest Pokemon, it's what everyone at your level is playing, right? It's a term that comes from a lot of competitive games, right? So in Magic the Gathering, which is where I used to play tons of tournaments, you don't only need to know what are the best decks in your matchups against them, you need to know what your store or tournament is likely to play. So even if one sort of line of Pokemon is really strong, if everyone is running Nidoqueen and you don't have a Nidoqueen answer, your core isn't good against the meta. And as you all climb and Go Battle League, you'll really find that the meta kind of shifts. Usually I find every 200 to 300 points, depending on where you're climbing once you get up to those levels. And the meta not only shifts based on level, but also on day. Some days I find everyone leads Nidoqueen, and then everyone gets tired of that, so everyone starts leading anti-Nidoqueen, and you need to adapt to the meta going around. So if your duo is great, you still are going to want to kind of adjust to the meta for what your lead and or your pivot will be for how everyone else around you is going into it. So meta is a really important consideration, not just hard numbers of wins and losses when considering your team building. So yeah, let's talk first of all, how do we build, what are we looking for in building a strong core other than winning lots of matchups?
Yeah, so like you say, having your pivot, having your way back in. So that's the covering your weaknesses methodology, let's say. So like going back to the Galarian Stunfisk, you say, okay, you lead that, that's your lead. You're going to want a pivot that can cover the fighters. So you lead Stunfisk, they have a Metacham. You want to swap in something that covers Metacham, but they're going to more than likely hard swap out. You don't want to swap in something that's weak to Metacham because that's just compounding your losses. So you swap in a flyer or a charm user or whatever you have. That pivot needs to survive, but also needs to be a safe swap so that when you, more or less a safe swap, so that it allows you to pivot, like you say, to get your alignment back. So you'll probably end up with a little bit of an energy lead. That's always something to take into account. So let's say you bring Frostlass in. So you've got Stunfisk and Frostlass. Frostlass then has a nice little energy lead. You don't really want to stay in as the Metacham for fear of taking the Shadow Ball. So you're going to swap out. So what is somebody going to swap in as the response? And will that something be able to take out your Frostlass? Or will your Frostlass be able to take a shield off them and leave you in a shields up situation in late game so that some Stunfisk can get the 2 earthquakes it needs off on the Metacham? So having the ability to build these ideas, that's a very specific situation, but that concept, being able to build a team of 3 around that core so that your third pick, like you say, can suit the meta. So if suddenly everybody's going back to running double Razor Leaf user, you have something in the back that can counter that. And then if another week later you're not seeing any double Razor Leaf, you can swap back out of that.
Yeah. So when you're building your core, you need to think about these important things. You've got to make sure you've got good coverage. Your core needs to cover each other's weaknesses. You need to have pressure of some sort in the core. It's very important. If all of your mons only use fast move damage, you're not going to pressure shields. And that means that you're going to be in really bad luck if they get hard blocks against you because they can resist your fast move damage and not do anything. Bulk is usually something you need at least on one part of your core because you're going to need, at some point, you have 2 shields and 3 mons. So it's guaranteed not every mon gets a shield unless you get the 3 shield glitch, which hopefully isn't how we're going to, our plan for winning better not be hoping the game breaks. The worst play to go. And we also need to consider just what type of team comp we want to run. If we're going to run what we call an ABC team, an ABB team, or an ABA team.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about the 3 general types of teams for a 3-team lineup here?
Sure. So the whole concept there really is saying that your A, your B, and your C, if that's where you're going, each have a different role. So an ABB, you're saying that your A has 1 role and you've got 2 Bs to counter that 2 things. So 1 effectively not becomes a loss, but if you lead Altaria into Azumarill and you have, it's basically the same as the double Razor Leaf user, that idea.
Yeah.
And you swap in 1 thing to counter the Azumarill, then you're okay with that being sacked by whatever they counter swap because you have another answer. And that tends to be important if you're having a more risky lead. Like at the moment, Altaria is a pretty lead with all of the Registeel going around. Registeel being the number one mon really in the current state of the game, the current meta. So you're leading Altaria, you have to have a way of beating Registeel twice, because really Altaria, even 2 shields up, isn't going to be able to take out. Like, it's going to come close, I think, in the 2-0. But if the Registeel has any sort of energy lead, it gets really tight. I guess depending which moveset you have.
I mean, everything Altaria runs is resisted by Registeel, so
exactly, yeah,
you're not in a good spot for sure. Yeah, so your ABC, you've got every mon has a different role, and they've got overlap because that's how you protect yourself, but you kind of adjust on the fly to how it goes. ABB, you hope to your counter, your A, to whatever your double back is. There's been a lot of double fairies, a lot of double dragon, double steel. So you lead a fighter, you have 2 steels in the back. If your fighter doesn't win a matchup, you instantly bring in the steel that you like less or that you think is a safer swap. Like Stunfisk is a great safe swap because it's at least going to get a shield or get some chip, even with their hard counters.
I like Empoleon at the moment. That's it.
Empoleon is another good option, and you sack it, but then you bring in your hard counter to beat that, and then you've cleared the way for your Registeel in the back. And Registeel is great right now because shields down. If they don't have a hard counter, you basically can always punch out the win. Even if they have a counter, shields down, you can often get it because Zap Cannon just flips so many matchups, even with the debuff there, making Registeel really strong. And then an ABA is the same as an ABB, but you lead your double type in the hopes that it's productive or going to win it with your counter swap if you need to get it, and still look to close it in the end. And sometimes the ABA is a little bit flexible, right? So if you're running double ground, for example, Stunfisk and Diggersby fill really different roles. Galarian Stunfisk and Diggersby fill very different roles. So it's not a hard line, but rule, but it's a good idea to keep in mind for how you want to build them. So in your core, you need to know what your role for each of your mons are. In your duo, think about it, which mon is better at a lead, which mon is better as a swap, and which mon is best as a closer. And obviously I've listed 3 roles there. Some mons work well in all 3. Some mons are only good in this, that, or the other. You want to make sure you know it. I mentioned Registeel. He's not a great lead because he takes a while to ramp up. You're not going to do any damage with lock on. So they've got 2 shields up and he takes forever to get there. He works so much better as a closer or as a counter swap if they bring in a dragon or a fairy type, because he can just laugh off their damage and slowly but surely Zap Cannon them away. On the flip side, Trevenant, I'm just mentioning Trevenant Registeel because that's the core that Lurgan felt everyone was going to be building around at Liverpool. And he was correct when you look at the numbers. Trevenant's an excellent lead. Shadowclaw hits most things unresisted because darks aren't great, or there aren't too many darks showing up because of the rest of the meta. Shadowclaw has fast energy gain, so you can always pressure shields. Shadow Ball is a fantastic move, and Seed Bomb is a perfectly acceptable move, right? So if I'm leading Altaria and they're leading Trevenant, I'm like, great, I've got a flying type versus their grass type. Still, if I shield the first move and it's a bait, I lose. If I don't shield the first move and it's a Shadow Ball, I still probably win, but I only limp away from it. So most of the time, they'll just leave Trevenant in because Shadow Claw still hits very well, and Dragon Breath isn't super effective against Trev. So they eat a shield, and they come out either equal or farmable on Altaria. So it's a great lead. It's a fairly good safe swap, and it's an okay closer. It's got a lot of bulk to it. But because it pressures shields very quickly, it's a great mon to have in the lead. So if we're talking about that Trevenant Registeel core, you want to lead Trev, you want Registeel in the back, and then you want to pivot in case they just hit something that you can't do anything about, right? If they throw a normal type in there to lead, Trevenant's in real trouble because Seed Bomb's a fine move, but if it's not a water type like a Zoomeril, Seed Bomb just doesn't have closing power like Shadow Ball, which is worthless against normal types. So you need some sort of pivot to go into that. And so when you think of your core, you're going to cover most things, but you also need to think of what you're going to need to bring in to patch it up. So yeah, we talked a little bit about Trevenant Registeel. What's another great core? What's a core you like to run, Zacharias?
So I run Skarmory and Swampert a lot. And a lot. And I've been running it since, I don't know, season 4 or something, a fair amount of time. I think it was fairly popularized by FP Sticks, I think. And I think Psionic ran it for a while. But I like Shadow Swampert with it specifically. And I think the two obviously fill very different roles. The kind of pseudo ground mud boy Swampert and the absolute spam it puts out from those huge damage hydro cannons. And then the relatively slow going Skarmory, like it's fairly predictable. You got your Sky Attack, you've got your Brave Bird, and you run into them a fair amount, even though in the current state of the meta in Go Battle League, Open Great League, really they're not great. Like with all the Registeel running around, they're not the best, but they still work. And so I wish I'd looked it up before the Registeel buff with Zap Cannon. But I imagine Skarmory was a heck of a lot higher than rank 33 on PvPoke. But it's dropped all the way down to 33 now. So I think Registeel is number 1. Trevenant, like you're saying, number 3, ranked on PvPoke. Swampert's ranked 8. So, most of the picks you go into your core will be fairly high. I think Skarmory, even though it's, low enough in the top 50, it still works. But you need to pair it with something that protects it. And I think Swampert works that way. It will really punish Galarian Stunfisk, which obviously hard walls the Skarmory.
Yeah.
Registeel hard walls the Skarmory, but Swampert will really dish out the damage. Even without Earthquake, the Hydro Cannons are just enough to keep pushing through. When you want to pair that then, and like you're saying in terms of lead, like you can lead Swampert or you can lead Skarmory. I like leading Skarmory. Even though it's not spammy, it still has that pressure because unless you're being hard walled, the air slashes add up. It's air slash, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, add up. And then the Sky Attacks are hard hitting enough to be punishing. And then you've always got the threat of Brave Bird. So frequently you could build up to a Brave Bird, bait with the Sky Attack. If they take the Sky Attack, even if it's a losing matchup, your chances are you're doing some damage and swap out. Or build the Brave Bird, throw the Brave Bird, hope they don't shield and swap out. And Swampert, if it has a couple of mud shots energy lead, if they're going to counter swap, but they hesitate, you're gonna love that situation. With that, then let's say that's your core, your AB core. You can decide: do you want a C? Do you want another ground user, or where do you want to play it? Do you want another flyer? So what I usually do is I try and cover both of their weaknesses, and I tend to lean into the grasses. So neither of them really want to face off against like Jellicent or Azumarill. Depending what moveset you're going, like Swampert with Sludge Wave can beat the Azu, but you're kind of bait reliant. You can just go Sludge Wave depending what moveset the Azu has and what the shield situation is, but it's not a comfy win. So I'd go with a grass. So you go Meganium, I go with Shiftry, which I think is the FP Sticks line, Skarmory, Swampert, Shiftry. I love the spam of Shiftry, and it can open them up to, like the spam of Shiftry and the spam of Swampert can open them up then for a Brave Bird late game to close out with Skarmory. So you're kind of leading your closer in that way. You're almost always relying on, I'm going to want to swap in Shiftry. And knowing that, saying that is my game plan, you're almost turning Shiftry into your pivot. And depending on the situation. Um, or you could go in with something like Altaria, because it has that bulk and it's the flyer to kind of go hand in hand. So you're going with an ABA then. You lead Skarmory or you lead Altaria, and you have Swampert in the middle to um, either counter swap or close out with the spam. Or you could have something like Scrafty. I like Scrafty. I think it goes well, and it has a similar kind of spam feeling. Obviously, you're not hitting hard with the foul plays, but you get to them fast.
Yeah, Scrafty's obviously been on the rise because it is a core breaker for Trevenant Registeel.
Exactly. Yeah.
Handling both of those gives him a lot of play. He doesn't care as much about the Zap Cannon because he runs Power Up Punch. So Scrafty's really a good filler mon in general. Yeah.
Yeah, so that would be my usual thought process in terms of a core. Pick out your two solid mons and try and flavor them with something else that fits the dynamic, fits the synergy. I like the synergy change in terms of going from something that's relatively slow in Skarmory and bulky because of its typing, as well as the kind of relative bulk that Skarmory has.
Okay. Yeah. So my go-to core when I was climbing GPL and was short on time, I love Altaria plus Medicham. Now they've gone down. Altaria's gone down because of the rise of Zapcan and Registeel, obviously. But I still think Altaria is great. It's got great typing, great resistances, wonderful bulk. And Medicham's the same way. So I find both of them, I never have to shield the first move unless Altaria is getting ready to eat a Blizzard or an Icicle Spear because Walrein's broken. Um, and so I find the pair works really, really well. With Medicham, I personally like to run Power Up Punch on it because I think if you get the counter swap, so Altaria, they bring in their steel, you bring in Medicham, you Power Up Punch, and then you charge energy. A Power Up Punched Psychic, which is the other move I run rather than Ice Punch, will KO most things that aren't Dark type. And they're not going to bring a Dark type in because you've got a Power Up Punch counter user that you're just going to Power Up Punch again and farm down. So I really think Medicham covers the weaknesses of Altaria very well. Both of them are pretty aggressive with fast move speed. Both of them are very bulky. So they work out really well. And then because they have so many dominating matchups, I like to have a safe swap pivot instead in the back. So I usually use Azumarill, which has gotten weaker again because of Zapcan and Registeel, and I prefer to run Play Rough because obviously the biggest weakness to Altaria Medicham is a fairy type. And so I need my Azumarill to counter usually their Azumarill, but sometimes a Wigglytuff, which is what I've been seeing lately. But who knows what anyone's running in the rank-free GBL this season, because it's all kind of, you'll run into random teams of stuff. So it's hard to say there's what the meta at the moment is since there are no rankings. So I like Azumarill. Ice Beam is really great because it lets me deal with their Skarmory swap-ins or their Nidoqueen swap-ins. Even though Azumarill is going to lose it, it still can force a shield and be unpleasant for them. Play Rough lets it handle or weaken the Azumarill enough that Medicham can beat it down. And also counters, any of the dark or fighting types they may have themselves to deal with. So I like that one. Nidoqueen is another great safe swap because Poison Jab plus Poison Fang just kind of gets you there or lets them limp away when you bring in your other one. So that's a really strong option as well. But so I've got two really hard, bulky winners, and then I like to throw a safe swap in, and I can just kind of, if I win the lead, then I've got a good counter swap for whatever they have to bring in instead of Altaria. If I soft lose the lead, I'll just let Altaria chip it down, keep the shields, and bring Medicham or Azumarill in to win after that. If I hard lose the lead, I always just bring in Azumarill because if I get two bubbles in, I can outpace their grass type that they bring in and at least force the shield and all of their energy. So that works really well. But so Altaria is really strong, closes out a lot of games. Metacham is really strong. Metacham I like because if you get some chip on the Skarmory, Metacham with shields will get there with power up punch. And then it will be super strong for whatever comes in the back. So Metacham's just so bulky. I like to run it whenever I can. And Altaria is bulky enough that, again, some chip will let it flip the Galarian Stunfisk matchup, surprisingly, because Altaria is just so bulky and non-stab rock slide. It can take 2 of them before you have to shield. So it lets it really just kind of slowly chip it down. Registeel's got more bulk than that, so it's in a lot safer spot than Stunfisk, Galarian Stunfisk. But, you know, Altaria has enough bulk that sometimes it can get you there at the end with shields down, even in losing matchups where they think they're hardwalling you. So I really enjoy that pair. I climbed super fast into what is Ace the top one? It's been so long since I've paid attention.
Legend.
Legend, yeah. So I climbed to Legend from 2000 or 2200 or whatever it starts you at in 45 matches, which I'm sure someone's done better out there. I'm not trying to act like I'm the end all win all, but I just stuck with this team. You learn the ins and outs of it, and played it really well. And I think I only had 1 losing set on the climb, and the rest were 3 to 5 wins. And so it's a very good ABC team that has a lot of bulk in it. So you can choose where you need to shield in order to get the lineups you want. And I really like running heavy bulk because it just makes you feel safer. The fact that even in a super effective move, I don't have to shield it and I can still get something back really helps on regaining your lines or your parity or anything like that.
For sure.
And then you want to talk a new core on the rise. What would you like to bring up to make everyone's day worse?
Well, but even before going into that, I think the point you hit on there, saying about knowing where you're going to shield and being familiar with the team, I think a big thing that people struggle with, or one thing I've noticed talking to people about picking their lines, is they'll latch onto a thing and run it maybe 2 sets and say, no, I don't really like this, and jump onto something else. And, you know, that is fine. But sometimes you have to get familiar with what you're doing. Like Nidoqueen is by no means the best Pokemon out there. You know, Lurgan Rocket ran it in his Shadow Nidoqueen in his win, and a lot of people were running it in the Liverpool Play regionals, and there's a reason for that. It is very good, but you need to know how to use it. If you just run straight Earth Power, or if you think you have to land the Earth Power, like even Halloween Cup, I ran it heavily and ran it with Poison Fang, Stone Edge. You don't need the Earth Power. You can just run Poison Fang the whole way through. You can beat down opposing Nidoqueens straight Poison Fang, especially if it's Shadow versus regular.
Yeah.
You need to know, and you need to shield the Earth Power they will throw. But if you call that right, you know, knowing your matchups and knowing them better than they do is definitely worth something in the core building. So if you're saying, I really want to make a core, what Pokemon do you like to run, and are you familiar with running? And that can help you feed your core, even if the familiar Pokemon you have is just slotting into an already existing core. So that maybe feeds into the rising core that is Whaleren and Trevenant.
Yeah, so before you go into this gym of a nightmare, so Nidoqueen shows up all the time, and I'm just going to give an example with my Altaria Metacham core. I lead Altaria into Nidoqueen. They're obviously going to go straight Poison Jab, Poison Fang, because Earth Power, I resist as a flying type, no big deal. I have found every time the secret to me winning this matchup is I eat 2 poison fangs, they shield the sky attack because I've got more bulk than them. And then as soon as they throw the second poison fang, I swap into a Azumarill. I've gotten it low enough that I can bubble it down. They're going to throw a poison fang and I'm going to eat it, but they're never going to swap a Nidoqueen out when it's lined up against a Azumarill because they're like, oh, this is my dream come true. I bubble it down and then I've got an energy lead on a Azumarill for whatever they bring in, and their Azumarill counter is dead. So whatever they bring in eats either an Ice Beam or a Play Rough, and we keep going. If Azumarill dies, fine. Then I hard bring in my other 2 ones. But I'm not going to win in a straight fight of staying locked in. I know I've got to go asymmetric against Nidoqueen, because if their Nidoqueen knocks out my Altaria, Medicham, it's not going to get there fast enough. It's going to win, but it's not going to get there fast enough at 0 energy before they get a Poison Fang, and then my Medicham doesn't get to do its work. Azumarill's got bulky enough stats and enough HP that it can eat a Poison Fang, bubble down, which is super effective on Nidoqueen, and have energy to land something coming into the back. And I know they're not going to want to swap because they really don't want to. That's why they have Nidoqueen, to deal with fairy types, or one of the chief reasons. So I've found, like, knowing that that's my winning lead, to swap in after 2 Poison Fangs, the loss to the matchup is one of those things that you only learn through time and experience. You have to get a feel for it, learning what your mons can and can't take as you build them. So in core building, 1, obviously, check to see if you've got good wins, good losses, good bulk, all of that stuff. But 2, get a feel for when swapping is right, when losing the lead is okay, because you know you're going to regain it with a play like that. So yeah, now tell us about Walrein Trevenant, the core of nightmares.
Yeah. You know, the reluctance to even talk about it, to popularize it any more than it already is. But it works. You know, you're talking about rank 4 on PvPoke in Whaleren, and you're talking about rank 3 in Trevenant. So you're pairing top picks. They can both do work against pretty much everything. You know, basically going back again to what Lurgan Rocket was saying, there's really nothing that resists both moves that Whaleren throws. You know, you're just sitting on a gold mine. As you were saying earlier, it's broken. Like, realistically, Icicle Spear does too much damage.
Yeah.
For the energy that it is. And Powder Snow just absolutely churns that energy. And when they buffed it with the extra little bit of damage, it made Powder Snow really good. It was already good. Now it's really good. So even just Whaleren on its own, but then Trevenant, the grass type of the meta at the moment, was Venusaur, maybe Meganium. Trevenant completely took over that ghost grass. It is, like you were saying earlier, super effective with its decent amount of bulk, Shadow Claw damage, the constant nuke threat, and a pretty base in Seed Bomb. And even then, you know, you can do a good bit of chip with Stab, Seed Bomb. But you do want to pair it with something that can hit those darks for super effective. Realistically, Whaleren, you know, it'll beat most darks. You know, it doesn't want to come against Scrafty. Being ice, it doesn't want to take those counters. Trevenant doesn't really want to do anything against Scrafty. The Seed Bombs will chip, but you're not going to win. So really what I've looked at there is saying, what do I pair that core with? And I'm saying either a counter user or a charmer. And it's fairly plug and play then.
Yeah.
You're picking your Medicham, your other fighters. You know, if you want to run Hitmonchan, I like the idea of Hitmonchan in this because you've got 2 relatively bulky ones. Like Whalen's very bulky, Trevenant's bulky. So something like a Hitmonchan that dishes out the damage, and then you have a lot of coverage options, and they never know what move you're going to be throwing. Or you could just go safe with Medicham or another counter user. You know, you could throw in a Scrafty yourself, or you could go with I don't know, you could go wild with the Vigoroth if you wanted to. You probably don't want to go double weak to counter, but at least you have your Trevenant to counter their counter user. So
yeah, the thing with Scrafty is it's not strong enough to beat both of them.
Yeah, that's very true.
It'll take one, but it's not going to get them both down because both of them, if you look at the PvP ropes, PvP poke, PV poke standings, they hit it around a low 300s against Scrafty, which is expected. They're going to lose, but it's not going to have enough left in the tank to close both of them, even with a shield advantage. It just doesn't have the HP. So yeah, you definitely want some coverage for it, but you can also, I'd sack a Wall Rain in a heartbeat to Scrafty to get it low. Or maybe the Trevenant's the better option because it's going to power up punch on Wall Rain.
Yeah.
That's one of those questions. I'd have to play it both ways and see which one feels like I'm in a better spot when I come in to deal with it.
You don't really want to jump into a power up punch Scrafty and risk taking a foul play on Trevenant just in case.
Yeah, fair.
But you're definitely safe if you, I think, Walrein, Trevenant, Wigglytuff. I think that's a pretty solid setup.
Yeah,
really, Walrein and Trevenant
really
don't
good.
want to be sitting next to Sableye. I think that's my big concern. Sableye is still very high pick in the meta, and Wigglytuff just hammers it.
Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of Wigglytuffs lately, and I don't know if it's because we have a lot of fighters to deal with the ghosts, and Wiggly beats ghosts and fighters. But Wiggly's just really, really good if you can surround it with proper stuff. I always like Wiggly. So yeah, interesting. Okay, great core. So hopefully this has given you all a pretty good idea of what a core is, how you can build them, right? Because the thing is, you find 2 or 3 mons that work really well. And with 2 mons, it's great because you find the third one that works best. And if the meta shifts, your core is still strong. You just change out that third mon. So as soon as Azumarill stops being useful, I take it out, I put in a Nidoqueen. Because Nidoqueen is a great safe swap and handles most things. And then as soon as everyone is running water types and Nidoqueen, right, everyone's running Quillfish because the world is awesome and everyone loves Quillfish. It's like, oh no, all right, well, I've got to deal with Quillfish again. I can't run a Azumarill or Nidoqueen now. I've got to bring in a Psychic type. And then we bring in Hypno, who used to rule the meta until all the steals got stronger and stronger. So a core works really well because it gives you the one place of pivot to adjust for the meta while still covering everything you can kind of generally expect for it. And then that's why a core is so important in the pick 6, which is what the regional championships like Lurgan 2 are. That's what Silph matches are as well. And hopefully where Go Battle League will go, because that's also, you know, the way the regular Pokemon games, main series games work. Where you bring 3 after you look at your opponent's 6. I think that's a wonderfully effective and much more interesting way of team building. And then you've got, okay, my core beats most of what they're doing. What are they going to use to try and break my core? That's what I bring in as my third rotational mon. So if you all watched my 6-1 practice cup for Nemesis over on PvP Steve's channel, you saw my core was Tentacruel and Shadow Tyranitar. Because they cover each other's bases very well. And then I just look at what are they going to bring in to break this up. And I pivot that third mon around the core. 9 times out of 10, it works very well. Sometimes their line makes no sense or is just wildly out there, which is great. I love when that happens. And you've got to rethink the whole thing, but you want things that pair well together. So that you can just slightly adjust it instead of picking a random 3 mons and hoping you win. Any final thoughts on cores before we shift over to our next segment?
No, I think you said everything I wanted to say there. Really, the idea of moving to 6 is show 6, pick 3. I cannot wait to see if Go Battle League can go to there. That would be dream come true for Go Battle League.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, speaking of Go Battle League, let's jump over to our next section. Whose line is it? Where we take the mons you all want to run that you suggest in various locations on our Twitter, on our Reddit threads, or of course in the comments down below. Let us know what you want to see next time. This time we've got 2 spicy picks coming from you all. So why don't you start us off with the first of these options?
Sure. So I'm going to be talking about Victini. That is Pokedex number 494, the Victory Pokemon. and it is ranked 378th on PvPoke. So, like you say, pretty. It's pretty low down there. And shout out to MJM for the comment and asking for Victini. So yeah, we are going to be really struggling to find a way to make this work effectively. It isn't a bad Pokemon, but it's a confusion user and a psychic that takes neutral from counter. And I think that just, and it's not bulky. It's really not bulky. And that just makes it a little bit too squishy and niche. But it has V-Create, which is massive and does not take long to get to with confusion. So I can't remember off the top of my head now, but it really can churn them out. And while it debuffs you, that can leave you in a decent enough situation where you just need to throw and pop out. So it's not a safe swap by any means. But I think that's why you then need to pair it with stuff that is a bit safer. So one Pokemon that jumped out to me was Diggersby. I think Diggersby is a good solid swap to go next to it. So in my mind, I'm leading Victini, hoping to catch something like a Metachan, maybe. Or I don't know, even a Skarmory. And you're hoping to hit that V-Create, at least pressure a shield and get out of there. You can resist the flying moves. It's resisting the confusions, but that's not your point, And you can swap in the Diggersby, which has those fire punches to hit back at the Skarmory. What do you pair that with then? And I sort of wandered around for a while thinking about what do I really want to go with that? And I sort of feel like an ABA with a Metachan, you've got that extra psychic and a bit of bulk. And if I'm not going with that, I'd go ABC with Trevenant. And Victini, more often than not, in my mind, is turning into just a shield pressure. I'm going to let it die or KO, and I'm just going to hope to pressure a shield out. Or hit a couple of V-Creates and hammer them with one of them, depending on the matchup. And if you can do that, if you can pressure a shield out, if you have a shield advantage with Diggersby, you're in a very good situation, especially if you can bait them and land an Earthquake. And equally with Metachan, if you're going Power Up Punch and Psychic, you can possibly bait them. And even if you don't, you can just keep hammering away at those Power Up Punches. And if you're a shield up, there's very little that really is going to beat you. So my mind, I think, is Victini, Metachan, Diggersby. And I think if I had a Victini that was playable in Great League, I think mine is like 1458 or something, 1460. Pretty awful CP. So maybe I'd be tempted to run it. But should the future day come when we get the second chance at a shiny one, like with Mew, maybe I'll get a better one. Or bottle caps. Come on, IV adjusting items.
That would be
Niantic,
so great.
come on. We will pay for them. We'll pay for them. So anyway, that's where my mind went. So Victini, Metachan, Diggersby. That is my who's line.
All right, fun stuff. Yeah, Victini is an interesting one. You could also, I guess, throw the V-Create and then try and close with V-Create. Another option, because it's so strong that even in the neutral, it kind of demands a shield. You just don't want to be switch locked in with it if they have shields up, because then it's just miserable, which is, makes it feel like a one note, but you can also deal with fighters that way. The real problem with Victini is it loses in the equal shield. it's going to lose to Trevenant. And it's like, oh, okay, I'm
Yeah.
bringing a fire type that loses to a grass type. It's always a risk. Maybe if it got a better fast move too. Like Confusion is a perfectly usable and good fast move, but it doesn't generate energy fast enough for us to really get to enjoy V-Create.
Yeah.
So, because V-Create is why you run Victini. Otherwise, it's, I mean, basically this, I'm trying to think, is it the same stats as Delphox? Delphox is a little squishier, but Delphox has Flame Charge and Psychic instead so that it powers up its fire spins.
Yeah.
So if we're kind of comparing the two of them, Victini's got a little bit higher defense and higher stamina by like 20 more HP. So it is better that way. But Delphox with Flame Charge is going to add up, and it doesn't have to swap out for it. So yeah, for sure, something to consider. All righty, now my Who's Line comes to us from Reddit from Jeremy TR. Shout out, thank you, for Nidoking, who we all want to be good, but is overshadowed as always by his queen, who is statistically better in every way, and move wise is probably better in every way as well. So why in the world do we run Nidoking? If we can run Nidoqueen instead. So just to put it in perspective, on average, Nidoqueen has 12 more defense and 11 more HP than Nidoking. Nidoking is attack weighted, which is not what you want in PvP. It's squishy. It has 200 less overall stat product than Nidoqueen. It doesn't have Poison Fang. So why would we run Nidoking? Or how I looked at it, what do we do to get Nidoqueen or Nidoking to work? So the secret to making Nidoking awesome and great is not to run Earth Power on it, which Nidoqueen does. Nidoking can run Earthquake, and you need that closing power to actually increase its wins. So Nidoking is great because it's got that. The problem is without Poison Fang, that means we're running Sand Tomb as our bait move, which is really rough because Sand Tomb's a fine move, but it costs 5 more energy than Poison Fang, and Earthquake costs 10 more energy than Earth Power. This is the problem we've got in here with Nidoking. So we've got to kind of deal with that. Now, there's 2 ways you can run Nidoking. I think Poison Jab is a fast move at the moment is probably the better option because fairies are more prominent than darks. But if you want to go really spicy, you can elite team on Fury Cutter, which handles the darks better and has great energy generation. But you lose your ability to deal with Azumarill. And Azumarill goes down to just Poison Jab Sand Tomb. So I think because Azumarill, even with the rise of the Trevenant Registeel Core, is still there, you need to have some poison coverage. Because otherwise, running all Earth moves with Fury Cutter, which won't get you anywhere, isn't going to do it for you. So Earthquake, however, lets him pick up some significant wins that really give him the power that Nidoqueen's Earth Power doesn't do. That higher attack lets him do much better against Registeel if it can land it. It can also handle neutral matchups like Lickitung. It does much better against Bastiodon. So it's really helpful for it. The problem, of course, is 1, it's glassy, which means we're going to need to pair it with bulk. And 2, it's weak to psychics, especially if you see those show up, or steals if the shields are still up. So what I found best to pair with it, and this may be cheating, is Walrein. And it may be cheating because Walrein's just that busted right now. Walrein gives us a backup Earth win con, so that if they're really determined to deal with Nidoking because they think their steal in the back can then win, Walrein can still bring it home for us. Walrein also has the bulk to soak a move or two, the pressure to shields with the Icicle Spears, also lets you deal with dragons better, especially Altaria, which Nidoking is just not going to get there. Nidoqueen has Poison Fang, which is fast enough to get to him to hurt the dragons. Sand Tomb is resisted by Altaria and is slower, so it's not going to work. And then in the back, I mentioned psychics are another problem that we want to deal with. And I found the best way, you could bring in Scrafty if you want, but I would prefer to bring in Cophagrigus, because Cophagrigus is super bulky, has that wonderful Shadow Claw, Shadow Ball combo to knock out most things shields down. And then you bring Psychic on it for coverage in case they saved their Nidoqueen in the back, because Nidoqueen will outpace Nidoking to the Earth power. But a Psychic from a Cofagrigus makes Nidoqueen explode. So it's a risky line, but it's got double bulk in the back and Nidoking lead to probably store some energy, throw a Sand Tomb and duck out, or throw the Earthquake to get the shield and duck out afterwards and catch it up later. It's a rough, I mean, Nidoking is really weak in terms of HP. So you've just got to make sure you save at least one shield for it. So you're going to want to work around that. But Cofagrigus and Walrein are both bulky enough that rarely are they going to get one shot. Cofagrigus, even against dark types, isn't going to get one shot. That's how silly that Mon's bulk level is. Yeah, so Cofagrigus has 100 and on average 168 defense. So even though it's only got over 110 stamina, it just is so tanky that it can soak a move and deal with it. So that is my line for Nidoqueen, or I keep saying Nidoqueen because she's everywhere. Nidoking, the king who we want and love to be great. I would like him to get I want him to get some more moves because I don't like running. I love Sand Tomb as a move, but it's just a worse Poison Fang when Nidoqueen does the same thing. Earthquake is a much better closer, so that's kind of where I leaned into Nidoking's victory. But you could also, in a Silph Cup, I think Sand Tomb, Megahorn may be the way to go because Megahorn is a great move in limited metas. It's not a great move in a steel-dominated open meta like Earthquake, but it's a great move when you're in a limited meta. So it's something to consider as well, especially with the Megahorn buff. Nidoking can be in a better spot to deal with that. So yeah, that is my Who's line, Nidoking and Victini. Some spicy choices. Let us know if you're giving any of these lines a try. Let us know how they're working out. We love to hear back. And of course, let us know what Mons you want us to build a line for. Let us know. All right, so why don't you take us into the next section, Zacharias?
Okay, so for those who aren't familiar, Silph run another type of competitive play, and that is factions. And we're currently in the kind of World Cup phase at the moment in factions. So all very exciting stuff going on there. And our faction, the Dublin Decidueyes, that's myself and Thidricker and a few of our friends from UCD and around. We play fair amount, and yeah, it's a really fun way of kind of being a different Pokemon Go competitive play. So you're a team of 7 active battlers each week, and you have, I think it's now 3 substitutes is going to be the way it's set up. So effectively, you could be on a team and you cycle in. So you might play one every, 3 weeks. You might play every week. You've got different types of meta to play. So inside each week, you've got 1 open Great League, 1 open Ultra League, 1 open Master League. And there's some caveats in that. So they say, you're only allowed 1 legendary or 2 legendaries on each Master League team, let's say. So again, this is the pick 6 format, and you bring 3. So you're playing best of 3 Silph style. Standard, you've got the Open Great League, Ultra League, Asterix, Master League, Asterix. And that is to say that there's these certain restrictions. And then you've got 4 field specialists. And the field specialists will play a Silph-specific meta. So that could be like Nemesis Cup this month for the general Silph, or frequently we've had 2 metas. So 2 field specialists playing 1 meta and 2 playing another.
And the world is running all 4 metas to make it even spicier.
Yes. And it just adds a different layer to the Pokemon Go PvP competitive scene. It means that you have that team mentality, and it's all points based. So you play your best of 3, and every one of those points adds up together, and whichever team comes out with the most points. So I could lose all 3 matches. Thidricker could win all 3 of his. So that means we're equal on points. So then it's up to the rest of our team members to bring us through. And yeah, it's a lot of fun.
And it's a great hybrid for people who enjoy GBL, Go Battle League. They're worried because, if you're running a 7-round Silph tournament, sometimes they have 48-hour rounds, sometimes they have 24-hour rounds, sometimes you have to fit 7 rounds in a single night, and you're like, oh, that's a huge commitment. Factions is great because you've got 1 match a week, and you've got 4 days within each week to find a time to do your 1 match. So it's very low commitment in comparison to what some of the Silph tournaments can be, but you still get all of the fun of adjusting and building new lines, unique cups, and you get that wonderful team mentality of hanging out with other people who love Pokemon Go and talking about it as much as you do.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. And feel free to reach out to us and tell us about your faction, or tell us about, or ask us for advice, or come and join us. We're always looking for new keen players, and we were very keen to set up sister factions and continue growing the scene.
Yeah,
it's a really nice way to play Pokemon Go.
So if you're thinking about Silph, but you're worried about going too deep, worried about too much time commitment, join factions. It's a ton of fun. It's great practice, and you've got a lot of people to kind of work and coach and basically work together to figure out what you want to run. And you can run some really fun, spicy stuff in all of it. So, all right, great. There's our shout out for factions, which I think is one of the most fun ways to play Silph. I love tournaments, but factions is great too. So let's end our podcast with a discussion of how Nemesis is going now. We're 2/3 of the way through the month. Let's talk about Nemesis. Zacharias is doing many more tournaments than I am, so I'll let you kind of start off the discussion.
Sure. So I think I bit off more than I could chew, really. I think I almost registered for 6, and I'm just playing 5. And I really looked for the tournaments with long round timers, because there's just too much going on in my personal life at the moment, between work and family and stuff. So, like I keep needing to say, like, we're dads who play Pokemon Go, and we both work at whatever we work at, and it can be tough. So we understand, like we were saying about time commitments and factions, it can be tough. So with that in mind, joining 5 tournaments, and most of them are 7-rounders, trying to fit those 7 rounds, 7 times 15 minutes plus maybe an hour of prep and trying to arrange times. It's a time commitment. That's not talking about Nemesis per se, but just to say that that's what it is in terms of Silph for those Go Battle League people. Nemesis Cup itself. So I'm probably halfway through on most of the cups that I'm playing. And 2 or 3 matches in most of them. And each cup I ran a slightly different line. So the first one I registered for, I ran Quagsire. So for those who aren't familiar, it's pick a fighter, pick an anti-fighter, and pick 4 bodyguards. So Quagsire fits into the fighter role for this meta. My anti-fighter was Mawile almost entirely. Shadow Mawile, I think, in every cup. I think actually in all the cups I've registered for. Except the UCD one, our Sanguine Bazaar Spicy Cup. So a shout out to our own Silph Cup there, where we try and run as spicy as we can. But anyway, I think realistically, the cup has been limited somewhat by not the fighter or the anti-fighter, but by the bodyguards. I think there are certain bodyguards that ended up being too popular or too needed. I think Walrein rose to the top. I think it's always the way. If they don't ban the top 5 or top 10 Open Great League picks, it ends up being there just on every team. So you end up with wall rain on almost every team, and I'm guilty of running it on every team pretty much I've ran because it feels like it's needed.
Yeah.
And then things like Galvantula rise to the top of the popularity because it beats wall rain. So it ends up with a narrowing of the meta because you're not limiting. So it's like if you say, well, Registeel is allowed, almost everybody runs Registeel.
Yep.
If you say Trevenant's allowed, almost everybody runs Trevenant. And then it's an answer to Trevenant or an answer to Registeel is necessary. So it's unfortunate that Walrein is kind of on every team. And it was obvious from the outset, like any practice cups, you were seeing Walrein and Galvantula. And Beedrill was very, very popular in the practice, but it hasn't been as apparent, I think, in the meta since.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I think I've enjoyed most of the matches. I've enjoyed most of the play. I've enjoyed looking at the teams. There is a good amount of variation, and I'm delighted by that. It's not nearly as narrow as the previous couple of months have been. And there's quite a wide variation and a good amount of spice and a lot of shadows. Any meta that has shadows makes me happier. And my Shadow Victory Bell has been a lot of fun. I anytime I get to bring that out, I'm always puts a bit of a smile on my face. Even Shadow Victory Bell versus Gallade earlier today. I don't mean to rub salt in the wound or anything. Beating Thidricker earlier in one of our ranked tournaments.
I'm only salty about the snuck powder snows on Walrein. The rest was all fair game.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, but the even an awful losing match, like I don't know what it is, maybe 4 confusions to kill Shadow Victory Bell. It's not a lot from Gallade. It still dishes, like you can put out a lot of hurt from Victory Bell, Shadow Victory Bell, the Razor Leaf, and even against Walrein. You can beat Walrein straight Razor Leaf, and that's what you want. So I have enjoyed it so far. I'm not doing great, to be honest. I always run a bit too spicy, I think, especially when shadows are allowed. I think I have 4 shadows in one cup, 3 in another, 2 in pretty much every other cup. Yeah. What about you?
Well, just lost today. I think Walrein and Galvantula are everywhere. Poliwrath and Quagsire are kind of the 2 dominant fighters that everyone's running. I think they're both good. I think they're both there mostly because they keep Walreins in check. I think Tentacruel, which I talked about and did my Spice video on, which you can go check out. Tentacruel is still performing very well. I think it's still got some great matchups. Wormadam has been a little bit on the rise, which is scary for Tentacruel, but otherwise, it usually does decent in the matchups. In our Spicy Cup, I'm running Barbaracle, and I don't know why. But I love that stupid coral Pokemon. Cross Chop, Stone Edge, Fury Cutter. It can do a lot. And it's really, really good against Walrein. To the point where it makes Walrein matchups miserable. Because even if you try and bait with Cross Chop and they don't shield it, you're still hitting for super effective. Then you just go straight Cross Chops and you'll get there. My new spicy pick, which it's not that spicy because I mentioned it for last month in the Obsidian Cup, is Venomoth. Infestation, Poison Fang, Bug Buzz Venomoth is looking really good because all the fires are mediocre in this cup. Mawile is kind of an exception, but a lot of people aren't leaning Mawile. Charizard is the only one that's really showing up, so it needs to avoid Charizard. But Poison Fang is a super great move. Bug Buzz hits super hard, and Venomoth is surprisingly bulkier than you feel like the moth should be. So I brought the Barbaracle Venomoth core in, right? Deal with your fires with Barbaracle that quad resists fire types, and Venomoth handles the rest of it. And we'll see how it plays out. I don't have high confidence in it, but I'm going to have fun playing that line for sure. It's an interesting pick, but yeah, I think Walrein is warping the meta. And the problem with Wall Rain is how oppressive it is with an energy lead, which is the same thing in a Obsidian Cup with Sableye. It's like they have a great win rate, then their win rate increases significantly with one or two fast moves. And the problem is right now, as I mentioned, fast moves are sneaking in. I don't know what they did to the code as they're trying to quote unquote fix it during our off season, but I feel like we're bleeding fast moves left and right. And with Wall Rain, two fast moves sneaking in means that you're two away from your second Icicle Spear, or you hit Earthquake super early. And that's just really, really devastating. If you can't kill Wall Rain quickly, once it gets energy, it becomes a problem for basically everything in the meta, except for what, like Empoleon, maybe. It's just Earthquake and Icicle Spear threatens too many things, and it's too aggressive at it. So I think if we were to redo this cup, just banning Wall Rain, I think would open a lot of things up more. We wouldn't see as many Galvantulas because it's not that good. It's just there because of how well it handles Wall Rain. So it's annoying. I think it's a necessary evil now at this stage of the meta for you to bring a Wall Rain yourself and to bring a hard Wall Rain answer. That's why I brought Gallade in my other team, because Gallade isn't showing up in many picks, but I like Gallade because I love Leaf Blade as a move, and close combat really pressures almost everything in the cup. Yeah. So it's very squishy, which is the problem against Shadow Victory Bell. That Shadow Razor Leaf damage is just goofy. So even though Gallade wins with 4 confusions, it wins with 10 HP left and a charge move. Yeah. So it's not great. But it is what it is. There is, at least outside of everyone running the same 3 or 4 Pokemon, we're getting a lot of variety in the other ones. And our cup at the Sanguine Bazaar, we've got a lot of crazy spice going on, and I'm loving to see it and happy to see how it plays out. So yeah, that's my final thoughts on Nemesis as we get ready for next month's cup, which should drop in a few days, depending on when this video drops.
Yeah.
All right. So I think that covers all the material you all are here for today. So let's end with the questions we are looking for you to answer, and feel free to answer both here in the YouTube comments, on our Twitter account, which is run by Zacharias, or wherever we post this, be it Reddit as our most common other option. But anywhere you hear or see this, let us know what you'd think, first and foremost, for Whose Line. We love hearing the spicy picks you all want to run, and we have a lot of fun trying to build the team to make it successful. What other questions would you like to ask Zacharias?
Yeah, what topics would you like us to cover on future episodes? We're more than keen to hear, and we've had a few suggestions so far. We're definitely keen to know what people want to hear about and what we can throw our minds behind and try and figure out with you guys.
And then finally, always a fun topic for heated discussion, what Pokemon or moves do you all think need to be nerfed, Icicle Spear, or buffed, literally every bug move not named Lunge in the game? Right? What are you all experiencing? What do you think is just too oppressive and too unfun to deal with, even when you've got a winning matchup? Or what mons do you wish were viable because Bug Bite's a terrible move and a little bit of buff there would make it better? Or Aerial Ace is too mediocre, right? Tell us what you think about that.
And thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Always a pleasure.
Love having you all around. Make sure, if you haven't already, you like and subscribe so we know you're going to keep hanging out with us. Let us know how your Go Battle League and Nemesis Cups are going, and we will catch you all next time. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone.
Bye.